everyone, and welcome back. Today, I want to talk about something a bit different. Not a horror story or creepypasta that my channel used to consist solely of, but a video game. Let's jump straight into it, and let's talk about Outlast. Outlast hit the horror gaming scene like a storm. There had already been horror games, some classics, some terrifying, others more action-oriented, but Outlast felt like a return to something primal. It didn't give you guns or let you fight back. Instead, it threw you into the depths of Mount Massive Asylum with nothing but a camera and your instincts. And that choice was brilliant. There's a unique kind of fear when you're not in control. In most horror games before Outlast, you had a way to defend yourself, whether it was a shotgun or a baseball bat. But in Outlast, no weapons. Just you hiding, running, and hoping you're not found. The lack of power was what made the game's portrayal of fear feel so visceral. It's the difference between watching a slasher movie and feeling like you're the one running through the dark woods, barely escaping with your life. For horror fans like me, Outlast wasn't just another spooky game. It felt like a revolution in the genre. It didn't rely on loud noises or cheap scares, although it had those in spades. Instead, it built an environment where the real horror was in how powerless you felt. It made you feel like a part of the world, trapped and vulnerable. And that's what made it, to me, so effective. Let's talk a little bit about the narrative of Outlast. Outlast follows the story of an investigative journalist, Miles Upshur, who receives an anonymous tip about illegal and inhumane experiments being conducted at Mount Massive Asylum, a remote psychiatric hospital operated by the Murkoff Corporation. Armed with nothing but his video camera, Miles breaks into the asylum, intending to expose the truth. However, he quickly realizes that things have gone horribly wrong. Upon entering the facility, Miles discovers that the asylum is overrun by deranged patients, many of whom have become incredibly violent due to the experiments. These patients, known as variants, are victims of the experiments carried out by the Murkoff Corporation. As Miles navigates the asylum's twisted holes, he learns about the Walrider, a supernatural entity created through a process called the morphogenic engine, which has driven the inmates insane. The deeper Miles ventures into the asylum, the more disturbing revelations become. He learns that the Walrider is a swarm of nanomachines controlled by a host, a patient named Billy. The experiments were designed to push human minds to the edge, and the Walrider was the horrifying result of this research. As Miles is hunted by both the variants and the Walrider, his only option is to survive long enough to gather evidence and expose Murkoff's atrocities. In the end, Miles confronts Billy, the Walrider's host, and attempts to shut down the morphogenic engine. However, after killing Billy, the Walrider transfers into Miles' body, making him the new host. In the final moments of the game, as Murkoff personnel arrive at the scene, it's implied that Miles, now possessed by the Walrider, attacks them, leaving the true extent of Murkoff's control over the asylum and the supernatural entity a terrifying mystery. The lore behind Outlast's story is revealed to the player through hidden documents that Miles can pick up throughout the game, as well as context clues from the main characters and enemies of the game. Now that we've had a summary of the game of Outlast, let's talk a bit about some of the main enemies you'll encounter throughout your time at Mount Massive Asylum. Dr. Richard Trager is one of the most memorable and disturbing antagonists in Outlast. Embodying the twisted horrors that plague Mount Massive Asylum, a former Murkoff Corporation employee turned psychotic variant. Trager was once a surgeon, and his fascination with the human body took a nightmarish turn after the Walrider experiments drove him insane. His role as a villain is iconic, not just for his grotesque appearance and methods, but for the chilling way he blends charisma and cruelty. Physically, Trager has a gaunt and unsettling look. His skin is a sickly pale, his face scarred and slightly deformed, with wild, disheveled hair that adds to his unhinged appearance. He is often seen wearing a makeshift surgeon's apron, torn and stained with blood, symbolizing his deranged obsession with surgery and mutilation. His eyes are sharp and crazed, and his mouth often curls into an eerie, almost friendly smile, making it even more unnerving. One of Trager's more distinctive features is what he uses for a weapon, a pair of oversized, bloody surgical shears. These massive scissors have become his calling card, and he uses them not just as tools of torment, but as a symbol of power. The sound of his shears snapping shut is one of the most recognizable and terrifying audio cues in the game. Dr. Trager's impact on the story comes during a particularly intense segment where he captures the protagonist, Miles, and tortures him in a makeshift operating room. Trager straps Miles to a wheelchair, forcibly amputates 2 of his fingers, and repeatedly taunts him, showcasing his sociopathic charm. The encounter with Trager not just highlights the physical horrors of the asylum, but also the psychological torment it inflicts. His actions emphasize the complete loss of humanity in the asylum, as he performs surgeries on patients and staff alike, all while believing he's doing something useful. Next up, we have Chris Walker. Known as the Walrider's Brute, Walker is a massive hulking variant who relentlessly pursues the protagonist throughout Massive Asylum. Once a soldier and security officer for the Murkoff Corporation, Walker's mind was shattered by the experiments conducted on him, leaving him with a singular obsession: stopping the Walrider by killing everyone in the asylum. His sheer size, brutal strength, and unrelenting nature make him a constant threat. Visually, Chris Walker is an imposing figure. He stands well over 7 feet tall, with a grotesquely muscular build. His body heavily scarred and mutilated from his time in the asylum. His face is particularly terrifying, with his nose ripped off, leaving only a gaping, bloody cavity. This disfigurement adds to his monstrous appearance, making him look less like a man and more like a creature born of the asylum's horrors. He's usually wearing tattered remnants of his security uniform with heavy chains wrapped around his wrists, a visual reminder of both his past role and the restraint Murkoff tried to impose on him. Walker's immense strength makes him a force to be reckoned with. He doesn't need weapons. His sheer size and brutality are enough. He can tear his victims apart with his bare hands, and he demonstrates this several times throughout the game, violently dispatching both variants and anyone unlucky enough to cross his path. His pursuit of Miles is methodical and merciless. Walker is a hunter, and the player feels like prey whenever he's nearby. In terms of story impact, Chris Walker represents the overwhelming, unstoppable force of the asylum's madness. His motivations are surprisingly focused for a variant. Walker believes that the Walrider is the root of the chaos, and he is determined to kill anyone he deems as a potential host to prevent the Walrider from escaping the asylum. This twisted sense of purpose makes Walker a more complex character than just a mindless brute. In a way, he sees himself as the last line of defense against an even greater evil, though his methods are brutally misguided. Walker's presence creates an ongoing sense of dread throughout the game. The fear he instills is primal. You can't fight him. You can only run or hide. His relentless pursuit becomes a reoccurring nightmare for Miles, and his final act, where he is ultimately torn apart by the very entity he sought to destroy. Serves as a brutal reminder that there is no escaping the horrors of Mount Massive Asylum. Moving on, let's talk about the Walrider. Now, the Walrider is the ultimate embodiment of horror, a supernatural force of chaos and destruction that haunts the halls of Mount Massive Asylum. Unlike the other antagonists, the Walrider is not human, nor is it tied to the physical world in the same way. It is a terrifying, intangible entity made of nanotechnology capable of bending reality and creating unimaginable carnage. Its presence is felt throughout the game, even when it isn't visible, as it is the true source of the Asylum's madness. Visually, the Walrider appears as a shadowy spectral figure, a swirling mass of black smoke and flickering lights. It moves with eerie fluidity, capable of passing through walls and solid objects with ease. Its form is ever-shifting, vaguely humanoid. The sight of the Walrider is accompanied by distorted, nightmarish soundscape, screeches, whispers, and eerie static, all of which intensifies the dread it instills. The eerie appearance and the unnatural way it moves makes the Walrider feel otherworldly, like it's something that doesn't belong in the realm of reality. But despite its spectral appearance, the Walrider's impact is very real. It is capable of unleashing unimaginable violence, tearing its victims apart with brutal efficiency. The Walrider's origins lie in the experiments of Dr. Rudolf Wernicke, who sought to harness the potential of the human mind through something called the morphogenic engine. The idea was to create a being that could transcend physical limitations, and the result was the Walrider, a nanomachine swarm controlled by a host. Initially, this host is a patient named Billy, whose mental connection to the Walrider allows him to manipulate it. However, the experiments eventually drive Billy to madness, and the Walrider becomes an uncontrollable force of destruction. In terms of the story, the Walrider is the catalyst for the horrors of Mount Massive Asylum. It is the reason why the variants, including Chris Walker and Dr. Trager, have descended into madness as the morphogenic engine's experiments push their minds to the breaking point. The Walrider represents the horrifying consequences of science gone wrong, but the boundaries of morality and ethics have been obliterated in the pursuit of power. And it becomes clear that the Murkoff Corporation's ambition to control the Walrider has led to catastrophic results. Now that we've talked about the story and the characters of the first Outlast, I want to talk about the impact of this game had on me as an individual. So this game came out in 2013, when I was only a young lad. If you've caught my other videos, you know that horror played such an incredibly large part of my childhood. However, I was a child, and I had no source of income. I was over at a mate's place who had just got the game. He and I spent the next few hours swapping controls and playing through Outlast. He and I played halfway through Outlast that day, and when I got home, I knew I had to find a way to get the game. I ended up getting it not long after that for a birthday present, and I played it religiously. I finished the game on every difficulty, and I found every optional recording and every hidden document in the game. Throughout the years, I played and replayed this game at least once a year. It's a comfort for me that I continue to come back to. The game's fundamentals remind me of those early day creepypastas that always captivated me. Stories of isolation, fear, and being hunted by something you couldn't understand. It was an experience that tapped into those same primal fears that creepypasta brought to life. The game's atmosphere, its sound design, and the feeling of helplessness reminded me of sitting in a dark room late at night, reading stories about creatures lurking just beyond the edge of reality. There's something about Miles breaking into the asylum that also reminded me about urban exploring and the nature of horror that can entail. There's more to talk about the Outlast series. The first game's DLC Whistleblower, the not-so-captivating sequel, or the most recent co-op iteration, which me and my friends had a blast playing. However, we'll call it here for the first Outlast game. If you'd like to see more videos on Outlast, or if you have any other videos for the Let's Talk About series, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear some suggestions if you had any. Alright, thanks everyone for watching, and have a good day.